Um, Welcome back to my channel. I'm Ellen Lewis from Crazy for You. And if you have watched me at all on YouTube, or you are in the membership site, or any of the kinds of things that you might connect with me, maybe you've been in the shop or you read the newsletter, you know that I'm all about sweaters. In the store, it's important to me to have sweater quantities worth of yarn. Um, in the membership site, we talk about how to make sweaters that fit. In the newsletter, I write about yarn and gauge and all the kinds of things that you need to know for sweaters and for knitting. And here on the channel, one of the things that I like to do is to present patterns. So every season, when Rowan comes out with their new collection, or the Noro magazine comes out, or I'm just pulling a seasonal palette of sweaters that I like, I always talk about the construction of the sweater. And when I'm talking about the construction of the sweater, I'm not talking about whether it's bottom up or top down or seamed or in the round. I'm talking about the way that the shoulders and the sleeves relate to one another. So how they're put together. And there's several ways to do this, but there's the three big ones, I call them. And I talk about this all the time because if you understand how they're put together, then you automatically know something about the way that sweater is going to fit and whether it's going to look nice on you or not. So somebody said the other day that they didn't really understand what I meant when I was talking about a set in sleeve versus a raglan sleeve or a drop shoulder. They didn't really get it. So, what I wanted to do tonight is to present to you, like I said, those big three sweater construction styles so that you can see what the differences are. It's kind of a follow up to what I had in the newsletter this week, but obviously it's easier to have it with pictures. So I did put together a little presentation for you that I would like to share. And I'm so glad my mic is working now. I do not know what the problem was with that, but boo, but yay now. Okay, so let's look. Okay, so basic sweater styles sleeve edition. And there we go. So that's the sweater that I'm wearing right now. That's Contentment by Kim Hargreaves. Okay, hello. Okay, so construction. What do I mean by that? Let's just define my terms. I mean how the sleeves and the armhole are shaped, how the sleeves are attached to the body, and how the shoulder is constructed, right? I do not mean top down, bottom up, in the round, or anything like that. That is an aspect of construction, but that's not what I'm talking about right now. Okay, so the three basics that I want to talk about are set in sleeve, dropped shoulder, and raglan. Okay, so let's start with set in sleeve. Okay, so this is my little sketch that I did. If you've ever had a class with me, then you know this sketch by heart. You know that I do it all the time when I'm talking about sweaters. This is your set in sleeve. And if you look at it, what you notice is that it has a curved armhole. All right. If you have knit a sweater from bottom up, you know that you work up, you bind off some stitches here, and then you do some decreases all the way up to the shoulder line. And the sleeve is designed to match. This portion right here is bound off, and this bind off matches this bind off. And then you have this curve all the way up. And this portion here is called the sleeve cap. Okay. So, what is the nature of a set in sleeve? All right, it has that defined curved armhole and curved sleeve cap. The fabric of the garment only covers your bodice. No part of the front or back is covering your arm. Okay. The sleeve is the only part of the sweater that is covering your arm. And it has that defined curved cap, and the shoulder line ends at the top of your shoulder. You see, so this is the line of the body of the sweater where the sleeve joins, and you see how it's right at the top of her sweater. It has less ease around the top of the arm, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a lot of ease in the body. You absolutely can. You can have as much ease in the body as you want. So, why do we like it or not? Pros. This is the sweater that looks great on everyone. Okay. It's very comfortable to wear. It is the sweater style that gives you a tailored effect. Okay. There's not a lot of extra fabric. And it's a very classic style. You know, it's always going to be in style. The cons are that designing that sleeve cap and the upper arm is extremely challenging. And it's a little more complicated in the knitting because you have decreases at different rates, and it has to be the right length. And if your row gauge is off, it could be a problem if you're working that way. And it's definitely more complicated in the finishing. Okay. Anybody who has worked one of these sweaters knows that setting that sleeve in can be a challenge. Here are some examples of some set in sleeve sweaters. I bring this one to mind or to highlight this one because a lot of people think that set in sleeve sweaters have to be close fitting. It is true that they are closer fitting around the shoulder, as you can see from this example right here. But look at the body in this one. It absolutely has lots of ease. So it's not that you can't have ease in the body, it's that you don't have ease in the shoulder line. Might have a little bit of ease, so that a cardigan can go over another layer, but you're not going to have the kind of ease that you have in a dropped shoulder. Okay, so this is a dropped shoulder. Basically, you are looking at a rectangle, okay? Because that's what a dropped shoulder pretty much is. There isn't any shaping for the armhole. I know that in some of the modern versions of dropped shoulder, and it's pretty much become standard, you will have some shaping here so that the shoulder angles down, but there isn't any shaping at the armhole. Okay, the armhole continues to be just a slash. In this version of it, you would have your sleeve, which has no cap, would fit in right here. So this line along here fits in along this line. If you've angled your armhole or your shoulder down, then this would fit in here. Okay. But still, there isn't any shaping to the armhole and there isn't any shaping to the sleeve cap. This is how a standard drop shoulder is seamed in. This is what I was explaining on the last slide, that this is how the sleeve fits into to the garment. And again, if you've angled that shoulder line in an effort to reduce some of the excess fabric, it simply means that the sleeve is attached lower. It doesn't give it shaping. Okay, so the characteristics are that the garment itself covers a lot of the sleeve. So if you look at this gal right here, you can see that this sweater extends out halfway down her arm, and her sleeve doesn't begin until just above the elbow. So you can sort of see as the light shines through it that her body is way in here, and this sweater is much further out and forms a portion of her sleeve. No defined armhole, sleeve cap is straight, lots of ease in the body. Pros and cons. The pros are this is very easy to knit. As you can see, there isn't any fancy shaping. It's easy to seam. You're just dealing with, you know, stitch to row, steams, and it can be worked in pieces or in the round, right? It lends itself to top down construction. It has a relaxed, casual look. It's much more casual than the set-in sleeve. Ellen Orr commented that she loves the bay. Yes, that's from the current mode. Beautiful, isn't it? The cons are that you get a lot of extra fabric under the arm. So right here, can you see all this extra fabric right here? You're simply not going to have that with a set-in sleeve. So you have this extra fabric. Um, and some people can think that that can look sloppy. You also can end up with some drooping at the sides. So let's look at what that looks like. So here is some example of some extra fabric. Right here is what I'm talking about with the drooping at the sides. All of that extra fabric that hangs down over your arm, look at the side here, how it you have this saggy bit on the side. And if you look at Ravelry and you look at any of the designs for an oversized drop shoulder, you are going to see that people are either standing for their picture, they're standing like this, or they have their hands down and they're sort of hiding that droopy bit. So have a look and see if you don't see what I'm talking about. So they've sort of cut that off here, but you still can see it. So this is another example of a drop shoulder, this Noro design. And this is by Kim Hargreaves. This is a beautiful sweater with a dropped shoulder. The more ease there is in the body, the more you're going to get this little bit of a droop. There isn't a huge amount of ease here, and the sweater is a little bit cropped, so you don't have quite so much droop. The other thing that you can do to eliminate that is to not seam the sides all the way up. So that gives the extra fabric the ability to sort of cross over itself and look a little less, you know, droopy. Okay, so the third one is the raglan. Now, that's this, and I'm sure you're all familiar with it. This is what it looks like if you've knit it in pieces, either bottom up or top down, but this is what the individual pieces look like. This is the front, and the back looks very similar, and this is the sleeve. And what you'll notice here is that this sleeve top right here is asymmetrical, which you don't typically see in a knitted sweater. But the piece is asymmetrical because this part of the sleeve actually creates a portion of the front. And this part right here on the sleeve forms the portion of the neckline. So basically, the raglan stitches are decreased from the armhole all the way up to just the neck stitches. So it's kind of interesting. Um, this design was originally created for a gentleman in the British military who I guess had lost his arm or had injured his arm in some way, and it gave him a lot more mobility around the body, but still gave him a nice, clean look in the uniform. So, body stitches decrease to just the neck stitches. We talked about this. There's a strong diagonal line that you see from the armhole to neck. That's going to be your clue that this is a raglan, is that you see a seam right there. It's either an actual seam where you've sewn the pieces together, or it's an increase line or a decrease line if you've worked it in the round. And you see how this portion of the sleeve comes and covers a portion of her bodice down below the shoulder even. Okay, pros and cons. It's very comfortable and attractive. As I said, you have a great deal of movement. There isn't any kind of binding here at the armhole. So this line and the analogous one in the back gives you a complete freedom of movement up and down and in all directions in your armhole. So it's very, very comfortable. It's easy to fit at the shoulder, so you don't have to worry about how wide or narrow somebody's shoulders are or your shoulders are. You're still going to get a great fit. And it has a really nice, relaxed, and sporty look. Um, it does require more ease and more fabric at the armhole than a set in sleeve. and it can be tricky to seam if it's worked into pieces. And one other aspect is that with a raglan, you really want to be careful about your row gauge. It's really important that your row gauge be on spot on if you don't want your armhole to be too long, or if you want to make sure that your sleeve fits in there, because the decreases are very precisely placed. All right, so here are some examples of raglan sweaters. This is one by Kim Hargreaves that's striped. I like, if I'm doing a striped sweater, I like to have them seamed because that way you don't have any jog. So, but that's just me. So these are all really beautiful. This has an emphasis on that strong raglan line right here. You'll see in a lot of raglans, there will be a cable or some other decorative element that highlights that line right there. So it's very pretty. If you're doing ribbing or something else, the way the ribbing melds into that can be really attractive. And here it is as a cardigan. I'm sure you all recognize this one by Petite Knit. One of the comments people often have about raglan is that it can be hard on a bust. It definitely showcases a bust line because you do have this strong line that runs right above and across the bust line, as if to say, there they are. But remember that necklines make a huge difference when you're talking about that. This is also a raglan, but you don't have the same emphasis on the bust. I've selected these two examples by von Hinternstein because they're both worn with the same amount of ease. If you were to wear a raglan with a great deal less ease, you would see what I'm talking about in terms of the way that the bust line is front and center on that. I'm not saying that's a pro or a con. It's just something to know if you are thinking about, your own bust and whether that is something that you are concerned about. So those are your three basics, and I would be interested in hearing your thoughts on whether you have a preference or not. Um, my preference is, of course, for the set-in sleeve because I feel like it really gives such a clean look. That is not to say that I have not knit and loved and worn over and over lots and lots of sweaters with all of the other lines. They have their own place, right? Um, there's nothing nicer than a really comfortable drop shoulder design where you can play with a motif or color work or something else and just not have to worry about making the shaping for that armhole. It's it's a matter of personal preference, and there are all kinds of guides out there that will tell you, well, if you have this kind of body, you shouldn't wear this or you should wear that. What I would suggest, if you're thinking about what is going to look best on you or what you feel most comfortable in, always turn to your own wardrobe and look at the garments in there that you have that you love, and think about which ones have which shaped armholes, right? If you're a t-shirt girl and you wear a t-shirt, then you're probably liking that set-in sleeve because a t-shirt has a set-in sleeve construction. I don't know that they always do the greatest job because a lot of times we wear them oversized, um, and the shoulder hangs off, but that's not its intended. It's not how it's intended to be worn. Do you know what I'm saying? So a lot of times we'll see set-in sleeves that feel too big for us because they don't fit at the shoulder. Um, but they are intended to be comfortable and not have a lot of excess fabric anywhere, to be a little more fitted around the armhole and comfortable to wear. One of the things that, like I said, you will notice about the drop shoulder that is kind of a problem is that in an effort to make that dropped shoulder less tight, or or to more tight and to have less ease, designers will sometimes design that armhole to be only as deep as, this the right here. So it'll cut right here and it seems sort of shallow. And that works great if you're standing like this, but you need a lot more ease in the armhole because if you when your arm is down, because it has to cover this whole distance. And that's a problem with some efforts to make drop shouldered garments closer fit. That was the problem that we had with the one garment from the one trunk show that I told you it was very, very uncomfortable. You really want to make sure that you have enough ease in the body so that the this portion of the drop shoulder is comfortable enough for you to wear. A drop shoulder really should be worn with between 5 and 10 inches of ease. That's sort of this sweet spot. 5 inches of ease at the body gives you enough movement. 10 inches gives you a lot. More than 10 inches, and you're going to kind of get that sad side droop that nobody really likes. So, and the raglans I think are beautiful also. As I said, I like to do them when they are pieced and seamed. I know that's totally outside the norm, but you do get a solid seam there that gives it structure. And it also is easier, I think, to manage the differences in shaping that you might have. Because when you think about a raglan, you have a certain number of stitches across your bust, and that needs to go all the way up to the neck. And the rate of shaping on the front and back of a raglan is probably going to be a different rate than you're going to have when you do your sleeve because you have fewer stitches to start. So it's easier when you're doing one piece at a time to keep track of those shapings versus when you're doing it in the round. Sometimes you're doing the shaping between these markers every row. Sometimes you're doing or every other row. These others, you're doing it every fourth row. So it can kind of be a little bit of a headache. It's why there's chocolate and vanilla, right? Everybody has a particular style and a format that they like to use for knitting. It's up to you, right? But in terms of the styles that you like, again, go in your wardrobe or go to the store and try on different styles. See if you can identify which ones are drop shoulder, which ones are raglan, which ones have a set-in sleeve. And when you can, try them on and see which one makes you feel the most comfortable and which style you like the best. And then when you're looking at a pattern, you're looking at the schematic, think about those little drawings that I did, and you can see, okay, this is a drop shoulder garment, and I really like that on me, so I'm going to be happy with this fit. Or I really don't like a drop shoulder garment. I know that this isn't going to work for me and my personal style. So knowledge is power, right? Um, and that is what I had for you tonight. And I apologize for all of the technical difficulties at the beginning. I am not sure what happened there, but I appreciate you staying with me. And until next time, keep knitting and create something beautiful. Good night.